On May 16, 1861, in a small village near New Hampshire, a boy was born. They named him Herman. His parents, Levi Horton Mudgett and Theodate Page Price, were descendants of the earliest settlers of New Hampshire. Herman was raised under strict discipline. His father, a cruel, alcoholic man, treated his children as nothing but a burden. Herman also suffered from his classmates. They mocked his physical and mental awkwardness and called him the village fool, the kind of simpleton every small town seems to have. Even as a child, Herman was haunted by strange, twisted fantasies. One traumatic experience changed him forever. A group of boys once locked him in a doctor's office where a human skeleton stood among the instruments. They thought they would terrify him, but instead, Herman was fascinated. His obsession deepened after the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, which destroyed 30% of the city and killed hundreds. While others mourned, young Herman imagined the flames consuming the two people he hated most, his mother and father. Like many future killers, Herman began experimenting on animals in the basement of his home. Despite their cruelty, Herman's parents wanted their son educated. With their money, he attended a college in Vermont and later enrolled at the University of Michigan, studying medicine. There, Herman discovered a morbid but profitable business, something like a dark version of Gogol's Chichikov. He forged life insurance policies for fictitious people, then stole cadavers from the university's anatomy lab. By mutilating the bodies, he made them unrecognizable, staged accidental deaths, and collected the insurance payouts. For the first time in his life, Herman was financially independent, even wealthy. Dr. Henry Howard Holmes. In 1884, Herman Mudgett graduated and received his medical degree. He moved to Chicago, the city he had dreamed about since childhood. There, he opened a pharmacy, but his true interest lay elsewhere: real estate scams, fake companies, and endless fraud. By 1886, he had grown tired of his real name, which he called a slave name. So he reinvented himself. From that moment on, Herman Webster Mudgett became Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, or simply H. H. Holmes. That same year, Holmes met Dr. Holton, the owner of a wealthy pharmacy in the Englewood district. Holton was terminally ill, and the business was managed by his wife. With his irresistible charm, Holmes quickly won her trust. Soon, Dr. Holton died, and Holmes persuaded the widow to sell him the pharmacy cheaply, promising she could live upstairs for the rest of her life. A few months later, Mrs. Holton vanished. Holmes claimed she had moved to California to visit relatives. When neighbors asked when she'd return, Holmes smiled and said, "People don't come back from California." Holmes now owned a profitable pharmacy, but he had no intention of living an honest life. Holmes continued the grisly insurance schemes he had begun in college, stealing corpses and staging fake deaths. Eventually, he amassed enough money to expand his business. He purchased the land around his pharmacy and built an enormous, bizarre building, one that locals would soon call the Castle. Chicago was preparing for the World's Columbian Exposition of 1893, expected to bring hundreds of thousands of visitors. Holmes saw his opportunity. He designed part of the building as a hotel, but not an ordinary one. Inside was a maze of soundproof rooms, false doors and windows, staircases that led nowhere, gas chambers, hidden chutes, and secret corridors. Only Holmes possessed the floor plans. To conceal his intentions, he hired a new contractor for each section, ensuring no one knew the building's full layout. When the hotel was finished, Holmes began his true work. Guests checked in, but rarely checked out. During the World's Fair, he lured travelers, young women seeking employment, and curious visitors into his lair. Many were asphyxiated, tortured, or locked in airtight rooms. Their remains were dropped through a chute into the basement, where Holmes stripped the flesh from their bones and sold the skeletons to medical schools. The castle was a place one could enter, but never leave. Despite his growing wealth, Holmes's debts were enormous. Construction costs had forced him to take out massive loans, and creditors were closing in. After the fair, he fled to Texas. There, using his charm once again, he befriended two unmarried sisters. Soon, both disappeared. and Holmes became the owner of a fine house in Texas. He dreamed of building another murder castle, but strict local law enforcement made that impossible. So Holmes began to travel, moving by stagecoach across the United States and even into Canada. Everywhere he went, death followed. In July 1894, he was finally arrested, but only for horse fraud. After a few months, the charges were dropped. While in jail, Holmes befriended a cellmate, Benjamin Patelzel, and together they planned another insurance scam worth $10,000. The plan: Patelzel would fake his death, and his wife would collect the money, sharing it with Holmes. But Holmes never did anything fake. He killed Patelzel with a lethal dose of chloroform and sold his body for dissection. Then, posing as a family friend, Holmes persuaded the grieving Mrs. Patelzel to let him care for 3 of her children, Nellie, Alice, and Howard. He traveled with the children across the country, sending her mother false letters about their whereabouts. Eventually, she grew suspicious and hired a detective from the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, a man named Frank Geyer. Geyer tracked Holmes with relentless precision. For the first time, the doctor felt real fear. Until now, the law had almost seemed to protect him. Following the trail to Toronto, Geyer made a horrifying discovery. The bodies of Alice and Nellie were found in the basement of a rented house. He continued the chase to Indianapolis, where he found another property Holmes had used. The elderly landlords were lucky to be alive. Finally, in November 1894, the hunt ended. Holmes was located by Pinkerton agents in a Texas jail, once again imprisoned for trying to steal a stagecoach and horses. But young Howard Patelzel was nowhere to be found. Holmes was transferred to Philadelphia, where he awaited trial. Investigations were carried out by the Chicago and Philadelphia police, and by Pinkerton detectives under Frank Geyer's leadership. When they searched the Chicago castle, what they found chilled even veteran officers. Human bones, surgical tools, and torture chambers. Newspapers exploded with headlines: "The Chicago Monster, America's First Serial Killer." Holmes even profited from the publicity. He demanded $7,500 for an exclusive interview, and the newspapers paid. He confessed to 27 murders, claiming that Satan himself guided his hand, though later he recanted. During his trial, Holmes remained eerily calm, showing no remorse and blaming his crimes on a troubled childhood. But the jury was unmoved. He was sentenced to death. On May 7, 1896, in the Moyamensing prison in Philadelphia, H. Holmes was hanged. Witnesses reported that the rope failed to break his neck, and for 15 agonizing minutes, the doctor of death slowly strangled to death. Thus ended the life of a man who sought the American dream, but chose a path that stripped him of the right to be called human.